All right, today we're going on a bit of an adventure. A detective story, really. We're heading back thousands of years to crack a cosmic mystery. The question is, how on earth did an ancient civilization, without any of our modern tech, no telescopes, no computers, figure out how to predict one of the most incredible and frankly terrifying events in nature? Let's dive in.
Okay, I want you to really try and imagine this. Put yourself back in the ancient world. It's just a normal day, right? The sun's up, and then all of a sudden, it starts to disappear. The light fades, the air gets cold, and this deep, primal fear just grips everyone. For almost everybody back then, this wasn't an astronomical event. It was a sign, and it wasn't a good one. It meant the gods were furious. And this is where our story gets really interesting. Because while pretty much the entire ancient world is freaking out seeing this terrifying random act of the gods, one group of people looked up at that same darkening sky and saw something else entirely: the Babylonians. They didn't see chaos. They saw a puzzle, a code, and they were determined to crack it. So let's start with that feeling. Section 1, when the sun vanished. Before we can really get our heads around just how incredible the Babylonian achievement was, we have to understand why an eclipse was such a big, scary deal in the first place. I mean, for us today, it's pretty straightforward, right? A solar eclipse happens when the moon gets in front of the sun. A lunar eclipse is when the Earth's shadow covers the moon. Easy. But now, try to forget all of that. Imagine you have no idea what's going on. The two things you can always count on, the sun rising and setting, the moon going through its phases, are suddenly going haywire. It's more than just unsettling. It feels like the entire universe is breaking down. Okay, so that brings us to our main characters, Babylon's sky-watching priests. Who were these guys? And why were they so obsessed with watching the sky day in and day out? Well, the answer wasn't just scientific curiosity. Not even close. Yeah, their whole motivation was something very different from what we think of as science. You see, for the Babylonians, the sky was basically a giant divine message board. They were convinced that everything that happened up there, especially the weird stuff, was a direct message from the gods. And those messages were all about one thing: the fate of the king and his kingdom. And believe me, the stakes were incredibly high. An eclipse wasn't just a bad omen in general, it was seen as a direct threat to the king. So suddenly, astronomy isn't some academic hobby, it's a matter of national security. You've got these court scholars whose entire job is to interpret these signs and advise the ruler. This could lead to all sorts of rituals to try and prevent disaster. And get this, in the most extreme cases, they would literally appoint a substitute king, just a temporary guy to sit on the throne and, soak up all the bad luck from the eclipse so the real king would be safe. Can you imagine that job interview? It's the definition of a high-pressure gig. So you might be thinking, if this was all about religion and politics, how did they end up doing such groundbreaking science? How, with absolutely zero modern tools, did they pull this off? Well, their method was simple, but it was also brilliant. And it all came down to a 4-step process. Step 1, observe. And I mean really observe. We're talking relentless, nightly sky watching, not just for a few years, but for centuries, generation after generation. Step 2, record. They wrote everything down, using cuneiform script on these incredibly durable clay tablets. Step 3, compare. This is the key part. They would go back through these massive archives of records, looking for any kind of repetition. And finally, step 4, predict. Once they found a pattern, they used it to try and see the future. And honestly, the real secret weapon in all of this, it was those clay tablets. You can think of them as the hard drives of the ancient world. They were so durable that knowledge wasn't lost when a scholar died. It was stored, preserved, and passed down to the next generation of skywatchers. Without that long-term data storage, finding a pattern that plays out over hundreds of years, no way. It would have been totally impossible. All right, so they've got this incredible system in place. They have hundreds of years of meticulous data right at their fingertips. The stage was set for their big moment, their monumental breakthrough. And this is where it all clicks into place. See, a single isolated eclipse, that's just a terrifying random event. But a list of eclipses, all carefully recorded and dated, that's not chaos anymore. That's data. And with centuries of that data, the Babylonians were finally able to see the beautiful hidden order behind it all. So they pored over these tablets, comparing dates, comparing observations, and then they found it. A pattern. a stunningly regular cosmic rhythm. They realized that very similar eclipses seemed to happen again and again after a very specific amount of time had passed: 18 years, 11 days, and 8 hours. Today, we call that pattern the Saros cycle, and for the Babylonians, this was the ultimate forecasting tool. Now, was it perfect? No, they couldn't predict the exact path of an eclipse down to the mile like we can now. But what it did do was let them say, hey, based on the pattern, we're entering a high-risk period for an eclipse. It changed everything. It took this terrifying, out-of-the-blue event and turned it into something they could actually anticipate. An absolutely mind-blowing achievement for its time. But this story is so much bigger than just figuring out eclipses. The real legacy here, what the Babylonians truly accomplished, was that they completely changed how humanity saw the universe. I mean, this was a massive, massive shift in thinking. For the first time, people started moving away from this idea that the universe was just a chaotic playground for unpredictable gods, and they started moving toward a new idea, that the universe is an ordered, predictable system, a system that follows rules, and, this is the most important part, that those rules could actually be figured out by us. And you can draw a straight line from them to us. The ancient Greeks got their hands on this absolute gold mine of Babylonian data, and they used it to create their amazing geometric models of the cosmos. And that work, in turn, became the foundation for basically all of modern observational astronomy. It all started with those clay tablets. So when you boil it all down, what the Babylonians did was just immense. They were the first to really prove that nature has a hidden structure, that if you just watch patiently and keep good records, you can unlock its secrets. They took humanity on one of its first big steps away from superstition and fear, and towards prediction and knowledge. You could honestly say they laid the first cornerstone for science itself. It really makes you think, doesn't it? They used centuries of data to find a pattern that was invisible to everyone else. And it leaves me with this one big question for our own time. With all the unimaginable amounts of data we have today, what incredible, world-changing patterns are just sitting there, hidden in plain sight, waiting for someone patient enough to find them?